We live in a world that teaches us to wear our past like a badge. Every experience, every mistake, every heartache, people carry it around as if it is who they are. But the truth is, the past is not your identity. It is something that happened to you, not something that defines you. The moment you begin to believe that your past has the authority to shape your present or your future, you begin to limit yourself. You become stuck in a version of yourself that no longer serves who you are becoming. The most dangerous thing about the past is not what happened, but the way we continue to retell it, replay it, and relive it until it becomes our truth. And yet, it's not the truth, it's just a story, one you have the power to stop telling. You were not created to be bound by the pain of what once was. You are not the mistakes you made, the people who hurt you, or the moments you didn't know better. You are not your failed relationships, your broken home, or the chapters that went wrong. But if you keep identifying yourself by those things, you'll keep breathing life into a version of you that's supposed to be buried. Too many people build a home in their past and wonder why they never feel free. They replay conversations, dwell on decisions, and cling to old labels that no longer reflect their purpose. But your purpose has nothing to do with where you've been. It has everything to do with where you're going and who you decide to become right now. The past is a teacher, not a master. It is there to instruct, not to imprison. It can give you wisdom, but it should never give you an identity. Every time you say, "This is just who I am," when it's based on a broken past, you choose to stay small. You choose to stay wounded. You choose to carry what you were never meant to keep. There is nothing noble about reliving old wounds. There is nothing empowering about letting yesterday dictate today. You are not here to be a prisoner of memory. You are here to rise, to evolve, to outgrow the limitations that once seemed like facts, but were only fears wearing a mask. If you knew who you could be, you'd stop clinging to who you were. If you saw the strength, the power, the wisdom waiting on the other side of release, you'd let go today. But the problem is that people confuse letting go with losing something. In reality, you don't lose anything by dropping your personal history. You gain everything. You gain freedom. You gain space. You gain peace. You gain the ability to move, to grow, to become someone whose life is not based on survival, but on purpose. You stop reacting to life based on what hurt you and start responding to life based on what heals you. That shift changes everything. Transformation does not begin with adding more to your life. It begins with subtracting the things that no longer belong. Your past is one of them. When you realize that you're not obligated to carry it, you become unstoppable. You stop defending your limitations. You stop rehearsing your failures. You stop giving your power to moments that already ended. The past is over, but it keeps living because you keep breathing into it. What would happen if you stopped? What would happen if you finally said, "That was then, this is now"? What would your life look like if you stopped being loyal to the version of yourself that never knew what you know now? You are not here to stay stuck. You are not here to stay bitter. You are not here to keep proving you were hurt. You are here to live in truth, and the truth is, your past is over. Every second you spend identifying with it is a second lost from building the future you deserve. Let it go, not because it didn't matter, but because you matter more. You are the author now, and the pen does not belong to your past. It belongs to your decision. It belongs to your present. It belongs to you. The mind has a way of holding onto pain because it feels familiar. It's not always the pain itself that people struggle to release. It's the identity they built around that pain. There is something strangely comforting about what you've known, even if what you've known is hurting you. This is the illusion of familiar pain. It whispers lies that sound like logic. It tells you that if you let go, you'll have nothing left. It convinces you that starting over is too risky, that healing is too hard, that the past is proof of what you'll always be. But the truth is, pain only feels familiar because you've rehearsed it long enough for it to feel like home. And sometimes it's not comfort you're looking for, it's just the absence of fear. But fear is a liar, and what feels safe is often what's stealing your strength. People stay trapped in old patterns because they are afraid to become someone new. They sabotage growth because it requires sacrifice. It requires letting go of who they've always been to become someone they've never seen. The unknown is intimidating, But what they don't realize is that nothing is more dangerous than staying where you no longer belong. When you hold on to your personal history, you're not holding on to truth. You're holding on to interpretations, assumptions, and stories written by a version of you that was still learning, still hurting, still unaware of what healing could even look like. You begin to believe that your scars are your identity, not just reminders of where you've been. But a scar is not a prison, it's a sign you made it through. We romanticize our wounds by building philosophies around them. We say things like, "This is just the way life is," or "I've been through too much to change." These statements aren't facts, they're beliefs, and beliefs, no matter how long you've held them, can be broken. You are not obligated to keep agreeing with the pain. You are not required to live by the standards that your lowest season taught you. You are not bound to any narrative that makes you smaller than who you were born to be. Familiar pain may feel like home, but it is a false shelter. It doesn't protect you, it cages you, and every day you continue to live inside it, you forfeit the freedom that belongs to you by divine right. Many people are afraid that if they let go of their past, they'll lose their sense of self. But the self you're afraid of losing is a version built in survival mode. It's the version that learned to cope, not to thrive. It's the version that adapted to hurt, not to hope. Letting go of that self isn't a loss, it's a liberation. It's a return to who you were before the world told you who to be. You're not here to be a walking memory of misery. You're here to become a living testimony of transformation. But that only happens when you stop clinging to your pain like a lifeline and realize it was only ever meant to be a lesson. Your personal history is not your inheritance. You were not sent into this world to repeat your parents' fears, your community's limitations, or society's expectations. You were not designed to carry the weight of generational wounds. You were born to break cycles. But you can't break cycles by preserving the past. You break them by disrupting the pattern. You break them by choosing differently. You break them by refusing to accept familiar pain as normal. The moment you begin to question what you've been conditioned to believe, the moment you start to unlearn what doesn't serve you, you take your power back. And power doesn't come from control, it comes from clarity. Clarity about who you are without your history attached. There is no redemption without release. There is no peace without a decision. There is no healing without a willingness to leave the old stories behind. And those stories, they're just that, stories. They are not commandments. They are not chains. They are not your destiny. They are chapters that helped you grow, not definitions of your soul. When you stop repeating them, you start rewriting everything. And in the silence that follows your surrender, you begin to hear something new. You begin to hear the sound of your true self rising, stronger, softer, wiser, and finally free. You owe it to yourself to stop returning to what broke you just because it's all you've ever known. You are allowed to stop explaining your pain. You are allowed to stop proving your worth. You are allowed to walk away from every role you once played just to survive. The illusion of familiar pain will tell you that without it, you are nothing. But the truth is, without it, you are finally everything you are meant to be. And when you realize that you were never your history, you finally begin to live like you have a future, a real one that isn't bound by memory but fueled by purpose. One that begins the very moment you choose to walk away from the story that no longer belongs to you. There comes a moment when continuing to carry the weight of who you used to be becomes heavier than the fear of becoming someone new. That moment is the doorway to rebirth, but you cannot be reborn until you are willing to release the person you've been holding on to. Too often, people ask for change while clinging tightly to everything that must be left behind for that change to happen. You cannot become the future version of yourself if you keep breathing life into the past version. You cannot carry both. There is a necessary death that happens before transformation. A death of identity, of ego, of the labels and titles and scars that have become your disguise. Growth is not only about adding to yourself, it is often about subtracting. The subtraction feels like loss at first, but it is only the letting go of what no longer serves the direction of your destiny. People resist this shedding process because they've mistaken comfort for peace. Comfort is what is familiar, peace is what is aligned, and most times the two are not the same. When you choose to protect what's familiar instead of choosing what's right for your soul, you stay locked in patterns that feel safe, but are slowly suffocating your potential. The fear of release is one of the greatest tricks of the ego. It tells you that if you let go of what you've always known, even if it's hurtful, you'll have nothing. But that's a lie. Letting go creates space, and only in that space can the new life you're praying for begin to grow. Rebirth is not glamorous. It is uncomfortable, raw, and disorienting. It requires that you become a student again, open, humble, and unguarded. It requires that you step away from all the false certainties that used to make you feel in control. It demands vulnerability, it demands silence, it demands trust in the unknown, and yet through that surrender something beautiful begins to emerge, not a version of you that is polished or perfect, but one that is real. One that is finally aligned with your truth, not with your trauma. You stop reacting based on old triggers. You stop reaching for approval from sources that once rejected you. You stop shrinking to fit the mold of your past. And in that space of surrender, you realize that the past version of you was never broken. It was just incomplete. Now you have the chance to become whole. Letting go of your personal history is not an erasure of memory. It's a rewriting of meaning. You don't forget what happened, you simply stop allowing it to be the central narrative of your life. You stop giving pain the microphone, you stop letting disappointment be the narrator. Instead, you take ownership of the pen. You become intentional about who you are becoming and why. You begin to write with purpose, not pain. The lessons remain, the wisdom remains, but the identity attached to that pain fades away. You are no longer the person who went through all that. You are now the person who grew through all that, and that shift changes your entire relationship with the past. So many people stay stuck because they believe healing means fixing what was. But true healing means releasing what no longer needs to be carried. You don't need to perfect the past, you need to walk away from it. You don't need to reconstruct who you were, you need to become who you were always meant to be. That person is not hidden in the rubble of your history. That person is revealed when you choose to rise from the ashes, and sometimes the most sacred act of healing is choosing to no longer explain yourself. You stop justifying your growth. You stop apologizing for your evolution. You stop defending your right to let go. When you reach that point, when you have the courage to let what needs to die finally rest in peace, you unlock a deeper kind of power. The kind of power that can't be taken away because it's no longer tied to a role, a wound, or an opinion. It's tied to your soul, and your soul doesn't need the past to feel alive. It needs truth, it needs clarity, it needs freedom. You begin to live lighter, you begin to think clearer, you begin to love deeper, not from fear, but from fullness. And that fullness could never be found in a recycled version of yesterday. It could only be born from the decision to say, I'm done living like this. I'm ready to become who I was meant to be. This is the path of rebirth. Not through perfection, but through release. Not through performance, but through presence. You don't need to be anything other than willing. Willing to shed, to surrender, and to trust that who you are becoming is far more powerful than who you've been. And when you truly embrace that, the past loses its grip, and the future opens wide, waiting for your yes. You were never created to be confined by what's comfortable. You were designed to grow, to evolve, and to rise beyond what feels familiar. But as long as you continue to identify with your personal history, you limit the very freedom that was meant to define your existence. The truth is, freedom demands separation from illusions, from false attachments, from outdated versions of yourself that no longer match your purpose. Familiarity may seem safe, but it is often the quiet enemy of progress. You can't soar while clinging to the ground, and yet many people remain rooted in the same identity, not because it empowers them, but because it feels known. But the known is not always true, and the known is not always good. Sometimes the most dangerous place is the one that feels easiest to stay in. There is nothing noble about staying loyal to your history. Loyalty should be reserved for your growth, not your pain. The longer you align with your former self, the harder it becomes to receive anything new. Life doesn't deliver miracles to those who are still occupied with memories. It delivers to those who are available, those who have cleared the space and are ready to receive without dragging yesterday's mindset into today's mission. When you cling to your past, your hands are full. You can't pick up blessings with fists clenched around heartbreak, regret, or old identities. You must be willing to put them down. You must be willing to let the old version of you walk away, even if you once depended on that version to survive. Survival mode was necessary then, but you are not called to survive forever. You are called to thrive, and thriving cannot coexist with your attachment to what you've outgrown. True freedom begins where the need for explanation ends. When you stop explaining who you used to be, when you stop defending why you stayed stuck, when you stop apologizing for evolving, you step into a higher state of consciousness. You begin to live above opinion. You begin to live above fear. You begin to live according to vision, not validation. The opinions that once had power over you lose their grip because you no longer belong to that world. You're not seeking approval from people who only knew a former version of you. You're not shrinking to be understood by those who haven't evolved with you. That's freedom, when you no longer live to be understood but to be aligned. Everything begins to shift when you understand that your past is not your responsibility. Healing is, becoming is, breaking the pattern is. There is nothing you owe to the former version of yourself except gratitude. You thank them for getting you here, but then you move forward. You do not linger in rooms that no longer feed your spirit. You do not stay in relationships just because they knew the old you. You do not silence yourself to maintain peace that was never rooted in truth. You rise, you walk out of the familiar, even when it's terrifying, and you move toward the unknown with faith. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've decided that staying stuck is no longer an option. You must remember, the future does not belong to the version of you that survived. It belongs to the version of you that was born when you chose to heal. It belongs to the version of you who dared to unlearn the lies, who dared to see themselves as whole, who dared to step into spaces where their past had no voice. That version of you is waiting, waiting for your decision. Waiting for your permission, waiting for your courage to say, I don't owe my history any more of my life. I owe my purpose everything I've got. That is the moment your life begins again, not when the past ends, but when your loyalty to it does. No one is holding you back now but the story you're still choosing to believe. No chain is left around your ankles but the one you've convinced yourself is necessary. The cage is open, the door is unlocked. The old identity has already expired, but you keep stepping back inside not because you're trapped, but because you're uncertain. It's time to replace that uncertainty with intention. It's time to live as if you know you are made for more. It's time to silence the echoes of your history and awaken the voice of your future. You were born to be free, not comfortable, not familiar, free to grow, free to transform, free to leave behind every label, every limitation, and every lie that tried to define you. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning, and it starts the moment you finally decide to give up your personal history and choose your personal power instead.